it's gotten a lot more difficult to plan for the static.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Heather brings up a good question. Why are people going to the office? What is the purpose of the office? And I think depending on who you ask, there'll be different answers for that. But it kind of alludes to our next segue here into the stability gap. So Matt, let's see the poll here. We have a poll, right? Okay, here we go. So how would you describe the pace of change at your organization right now? And Heather, I'll get back to your question, but it's going to be kind of related to this. Yeah, I'm just really curious.
Yeah, constant.
Yeah. And as we're starting to populate this too, I think, if it's public knowledge, it'd be kind of interesting to hear from the audience, like how many of you have experienced like new transition in leadership within the last 2 years or 3 years? I think it's so prevalent and something that as we're in the data and we're looking at year by year trends, um, it's one of those things that becomes kind of hidden where we're not necessarily paying attention to it, and like that leadership stability really is crucial for us to be able to forecast appropriately. So I think we can go ahead and end the poll. Where do we end up here?
Ended with moderate in front, which is was a surprise at first. It seemed like it came out hard with the constant, but um I think this is a good flag that we have more folks saying moderate at this point. Uh
Yeah.
would love to see even more tip towards the moderate and stable. I don't know if 2026 will be that year
I
year
don't
yet.
think so. I don't think we're going back to stable. I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Cool.
yeah. So
All right.
yeah, so Heather, I think, there's this idea of what I was talking about, depending on who you ask, there's going to be a different purpose for the office, but a lot of this trickles down from the top, right? From the CEO, from leadership. We were doing a little bit of digging into this, and what we found is there's nearly 40 CEO changes every week. This is across 2,000 US based companies. Uh, but something to not scoff at is for Fortune 500 companies, there's at least 50% of Fortune 500 companies that are seeing new CEOs. Another thing that comes with this is that you might get a new CEO, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be that person leading the helm, long term. There's a lot of interim CEOs. And so how do you navigate that? So not only have we created this change at the top, but we're also creating this temporary change and for how long. So it's a really interesting, problem that we're looking at as far as like how this trickles down. And this really came about naturally when we're working with our customers. Some of them, were kind of in this place of feeling frozen where they didn't know which direction to go. And as we started to dig into it, we're like, well, why can't you plan, for some portfolio strategy or, even looking at updating some TI and some buildings. And they're like, well, we have a new CEO coming and we don't know, what the office policy is going to be. We don't know what our portfolio strategy is going to be, all those different things. And Matt, I think we can go to the next slide too. I think there's like an interesting talking point here. So, how does this really impact us, working in the office space? And really what it comes down to is the policy is one of those like cheapest levers for leadership to actually pull on. And again, how hard they want to pull on it, meaning, from the enforcement perspective, is really up to them. Like, I think there's a dance that they're playing as far as like from a culture perspective. Do we want to be super aggressive in enforcing this, or do we want to kind of do it as like a soft, mandate to see like the influence that we'd actually have within the office space or in the culture? Then we get into the phase two of like the collision, and this mandate hits, and we're already hearing, in the chat that we don't have enough seats. But then, do we have enough conference rooms? Do we have enough phone booths with these new mandates coming in? I was talking about that customer earlier that has incredibly high utilization rates, and they have a new policy coming at them. How are they going to be able to manage this? What does this actually look like? And then all these things come together, and there's the reckoning of policy space and behavior. And unfortunately, it all becomes misaligned. It wasn't done in a strategic way or in a cohesive way. I think there was a comment earlier of like someone talking about different parts of the organization needing to communicate. I think it was maybe financial or real estate. I can't go that far back to the chat, but really, it really does highlight some of the silos that happen within our organizations. So how are we starting to navigate some of these gaps that exist all the way from the top of our organizations, right? And Matt, if we go to the next slide too, I think, the takeaway here and kind of getting back to the snack down metaphor, the intent was stability and the experience is volatility. And this is just a fact of the way that we're working today and the way that, economies across the world are dealing with all this change. There's so many different CEOs coming. And so we have the snow, we have the data that's coming at us, and, are we really looking at where these footprints lead us? Izzy, do you have anything else here about the CEO gap?
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think about personal anecdote. I was on the real estate team at Twitter, the the OG Twitter, but going into the acquisition and just having been through the personal experience of this kind of interim, right? So we didn't actually technically have a CEO change during that time, but it was about 6 to 9, I think more like 9 months between when we were told that a change was coming and when the deal actually closed. And during that time, just having, being in that space of like, hurry up and get the answer, but we're not actually going to implement it. Now, like, let's try a different potential sort of plan and hurry up and get the answer what that looks like, but we're not going to actually implement it, right? And just seeing the trickle down of all of that. And we may have never implemented any of it, right? And so I think just it's hard to put into words how that instability and, the ground moving below your feet kind of
Yeah.
impacts our ability to do our job or even to start a program to collect data or start a program to provide employees with an employee-facing app, right? Like even just making these decisions that will help us get to an end goal, no matter what the policy ends up being. It's just becomes really, really hard to operate in that environment. So I guess partially an empathy, compassion for this
Yeah, no,
environment we're
thanks
in
for
and how
sharing that.
many companies
Yeah.
are dealing with interim CEOs or new leadership. I think Alex had mentioned, for example, new leader, and they had a sudden move to 2 times a week without having done the background work, which all of us on this webinar likely are aware of how much goes into understanding the impact of a scenario. You need to know, am I going to need to hire new people? Do I need a new lease? Do I need to get rid of a lease? Do I need to go to my service provider and tell them their contract's changing? Do I need a new booking tool, right? There's just so much that goes into it. And until we have clarity on the direction, we can't make those decisions. We can't give our partners clarity, all of that. So I think it's a really, like we said, 2026 it's going to be an interesting year with all these changes. We're here to help facilitate conversation if we can, and
Yeah.
know that a lot of you all are going through this.
Yeah, totally. I think, working closely with a client in London as well, that was shifting some of their portfolio to APAC, and then new CEOs coming in, and that shift has kind of been put on hold, and they're going through exactly what you were just talking about of like this kind of hurry up, pull these reports quickly, but have no idea if it actually means anything. Like, and so yeah, thanks for sharing that story too. Super helpful to have that context of being in that seat. So. Well, Heather brought up an interesting one where this problem became so toxic that there was actual physical altercations because people couldn't find desks or parking spaces. So we hope it doesn't come to that, but that is a very detrimental impact to culture.
Or anything more human?
Yeah. So,
Survival of the fittest, I guess.
yeah. But, we don't want to just leave you here with this kind of doom and gloom vibe. We just wanted to highlight and relate, to a lot of the different things that are coming at us within the industry. And the good news is that there's a way out. And we have a couple of different things we wanted to discuss with you. But before we do that, we have another poll here. So what's your biggest priority in the next 12 months? And given, some of the conversation around policy, how we're designing spaces and also looking at some of the change that's coming at us from leadership. Really curious to see where this lands currently with the people that are still on. So we have about 10 minutes left, and we'll kind of get into some solutions here, some ideas that might be helpful to you, and then talk about some new tools as well. So, all right.
All the above, still winning out. We've got a lot on our plates, folks.
All of the above. Okay. Well, optimizing existing space is second runner, right? Runner
Mhm.
up, runner up. That's what it is. Which is, I think that's telling, like working with what we have. People are kind of maybe stuck from like a strategic perspective. Maybe that right sizing exercise was really aggressive over the last couple of years, and now we have spaces that we're managing and dealing with and trying to make the most of. I like that improving employee experience is actually third there too. That's cool to see.